Gators Breakdown episode 61 is ready to go. I'm your host, David Waters. You can find me on Twitter at GatorDave_SEC. And a single co-host for this show, Bill Sykes. You can find Bill on Twitter at RealB Sykes. Special episode here, Bill. We'll have to split the shows up this week because real life gets in the way sometimes. So thanks for joining me here this night. Recording, episode 61 here at Gators Breakdown to get your thoughts and analysis with some numbers backing up on this recent 2017 NFL draft for these Gators.
Yeah, man, I've actually been working on this little pet project, the statistical analysis, and we were going to do a big showdown between me and Joey tomorrow night, but schedules conflicted, so we're going to kind of do some stats tonight, and then you guys are going to do your thing tomorrow.
Sounds good. I'm not as prepared either. Had big welcome to Rockville here in Jacksonville this weekend, so rocked out, got sunburnt. Voice is probably kind of raspy a little bit, but all was good in the world of
but
Rockville.
You stayed sober.
I stayed sober.
Allegedly.
It's too man, it is so hot out there. I don't even feel like drinking alcohol. It is brutal out there. So yeah, before we dive out there into this 2017 NFL draft, remember you can find all your past episodes of Gators Breakdown episodes on SoundCloud, iTunes, and YouTube. Search on those sites or get the links by following us on Twitter at Gators Breakdown and on Facebook at Gators Breakdown. Also, share the show if you like it. Leave a review and rate on iTunes. Leave some comments on YouTube. We respond there as much as we can. On Twitter as well. You guys know we are pretty interactive there as well. We talk. We can talk your heads off if you'll allow us to. So, Bill, you and I, we seem to have the debates with others out there about the importance of recruiting elite talent, whether it be on the 24/7 Gator Bait message board, Alligator Alley, or here on or out there on Twitter. We have the motto: "Stars matter," and we firmly believe that. We've backed it up before with analysis. But Bill, not only does that play a part in recruiting, it also trickles to the NFL draft. So before we dive into the draft specifically with some numbers that you've dug up, I'll ask you straightforward, Bill: why do stars matter?
Well, as it pertains to the NFL draft, I first approached that question, I guess several months ago. You hear when you hear these pundits talking about the Super Bowl and the talking heads and say, oh, this such and such was a 2-star, or this shows you how stupid those rankings are. And, I saw some guys on Twitter that were talking about how, all the recruiting websites had you fooled and all this stuff. And they point to the unranked guy or the 3-star that makes the first round. And honestly, man, I don't care. Either way, I just want to know what's up because I'm a geek about football, man. I love it. I love to tear it apart, and I want to find out what's what. And I'm opinionated, so I like to be right. And so I started doing some homework, man. And whatever the numbers show, I'm fine with. But I wanted to kind of put a definitive stamp on this and say, you know what? Somebody needs to do some actual homework. And I want to know, do these stars actually translate to draft success? Now, tonight won't be about, what these guys do in the NFL. I'm not going to tell you how this affects their professional career outside of football or which retirement homes they qualify for. It's draft time, so that's kind of how I associated it tonight.
Yeah, I mean, Joey and I will mention, Joey and I will do a show, tomorrow night, our normal Monday times, where we'll kind of, look at how they've maybe fit into the teams, or why some players fell, specifically Tabor, Wilson, Brantley. We'll have all that kind of talk here, but tonight's kind of more the statistical, in-depth analysis of why, the top tier of players also make better NFL players, or win at least on draft night. Like you said, we don't know what happens after this, but when it comes to draft night, the stars matter. And you can look at the first round of this 2017 NFL draft and just look at the numbers and look at the ranking system and how it played out there. 5-star players out of 32 picks. There were 10 5-star players picked. And we're talking about elite players here. So that also goes to the 4-stars. 13 4-stars were chosen in the first round of the NFL draft. Go down to the 3-stars, 5 of those, 2 2-stars, and 2 unranked players when they were coming out of high school into college, that was it. They don't re-rank them and when they go into the NFL draft. So when they were coming, those numbers bear mentioning again that the stars do matter. You're highly recruited. It trickles to the NFL draft as well. As I mentioned, 10 5-stars and 13 4-stars. 23 out of the 32 were elite players. So that's the top. That's the top 32 picks of the NFL draft. That also shows us, stars do matter.
Well, here's the thing, though. But if I'm what I saw online referred to as a star truther, somebody that says those don't matter. If I'm one of those people, and hey, respect your opinion. All jokes aside, it's just for fun.
Yes.
But I would then counter and say, yeah, but at the same time, in that first round, you had 6 3-stars and 4 guys that were 2 stars or not ranked at all. And that's 10 guys out of the first round that are not ranked at all. Why should that matter any less than the 10 5-stars? And on the surface, it's kind of a valid point. But Dave, if I may, I want to take you guys down the rabbit hole of the numbers here for a moment and kind of work backwards from all the high school players in the country and kind of start narrowing this down to give you an idea of what we're dealing with here. Is that cool?
Do it.
Okay.
Do it.
All right. Now, I'm doing this all like academically sound, I think. Okay.
You got the chalkboard ready?
A website that the NCAA publishes, basically trying to warn kids that you're probably not going to make it to the NFL. This was updated March 10th, 2017. There's about 1,083,308 high school football players in America. Now, they did not publish this year how many of those were seniors that were going to be going off to college potentially to play football this year. But the latest report I found that kind of went hand in hand with this, and they've quoted it a few times, SB Nation quotes this NCAA report and says that by all estimates, the number of high school senior football players each year hovers around 300,000. The population continues to grow, but sometimes it doesn't go up. It actually has dropped. I think it peaked in 2009. But for all of our purposes here, we can say that it averages about 300,000 per year. That's high school seniors playing football. These are the guys that are eligible for a star rating. Now, they might be a 0-star, maybe they don't deserve a rating, or they might be a 5, but that's your pool that you're working with. Of those, about 73,000 the year that I found when was 2015 was the last reported, 73,660 of those went off to play NCAA football. Now, of those, you come on down, let me find my stats here. For 24/7 Sports, they rate and profile about 3,500 kids. The 3-stars of those were about 2,147. There's only 335 of those that are 4-stars, and only 32 in the entire country are 5-stars. Out of 300,000 seniors, only 32 of these individuals have been singled out by these services. And remember, this isn't just 24/7. This is their composite. So we're talking about ESPN, Scout, Rivals, 24/7, and whoever else they factor in there. As a consensus or as a group, they have chosen those 32 individuals as the cream of the crop. And what people say when they're saying stars don't matter is they're saying this margin of error with these arbitrary opinions, these subjective opinions, is going to be significant enough to what really doesn't matter. And that's why we see the 10 5-stars versus 10 2 and 3-stars in the first round. And on the surface, that seems like a sound argument until you start considering the probabilities based on the number of these kids to actually make it here. And that's where we start running into trouble with the idea that the stars don't have a correlation with success. Because when you come on down, like to the percentage of those drafted, sure, only 9% of the draft this year, those 253 young men that were drafted were 5-stars. Triple that, 30%, were 4-stars. And even more than that, were 3-stars at 36%. And then it does tail off a little bit to 25% 2-star and unranked. When you look at those raw numbers, it says, sure, stars don't matter. But wait. When you get into the percentage of each band of those stars that was drafted, it tells a whole different story. Because remember, there were only 32 of them, right, Dave?
That's right.
Well, 23 of, and now I want to qualify this too. These kids obviously weren't all from the same recruiting class, And so what I'm doing is I'm assigning almost like an absolute value to it, to where just about every year you have between 25 and 35 5-stars. It stays constant. So it is consistent to say we're going to base this off a yearly average of about 30 to 32 5-stars that are coming out each year. Does that make sense?
Yep.
And of the 32 that were taken in for this in this cycle, well, 23 of those got drafted this year. That's a 72% success rate. You go down to the 4-stars, out of 335, well, only 77 of those got drafted. I believe that's right, yeah. And if you go down to 3-stars, out of 2,147, well, only 90 of those got drafted. And then if you go down to the 2-stars and under, there were 297,486 of those kids, and only 63 of them were drafted. So if you compare the percentages, the 5-stars had a 72% hit rate. The 4-stars had a 23% hit rate. The 3-stars had a 4% hit rate, and the 2-stars and under had a 0.02%. So 0.02% of 1% hit
All
rate.
right, so go back and compare the 5 and the 4-stars. There was that big of a percentage difference?
Yeah, it's triple. I mean, think about this. If you go to an investor, let's say you say, hey, I need to make some money. And you go to this investor and he says, hey, I got some hot stocks for you. You're going to have a 72% beneficial return rate. You'd say, I'd take all you got. It's like buying $20 bills for $5. You know, I mean, 72% hit rate. So that's when these services are combining the records for, you know, an aggregate view of this, they're hitting over 70% of the time. The 4-stars, they're only hitting 23% of the time. And now that's not to say these services are hitting or missing either. That's just these kids are panning out. And the 3-stars are hitting at the NFL at a 4% rate on the draft wise, and the 2-stars and under only 0.02% of those. So, I mean, it just imagine if you could buy lottery tickets with a 72% success rate. That's the kind of investment these 5-star kids are, and that's why when you load up on them, if you take 10 of them generally across the nation, out of every 10 5-stars, over 7 of them on average are going to be drafted in NFL. And the NFL kids that like Florida's put in the league, it's not like those are the kids that are washing out as far as in the college. That's really good kids that are getting drafted. That's your Tebows and Nelsons and Harvins and Jarvis Moss and Emmitt Smith. And I mean, that's the kids you want in your program. Now, here's to put this in an even more damning perspective of this idea that stars don't matter. When we look at 72% hitting for the 5-stars and 4-stars hitting at 23%, that means a 5-star is 3.13 times more likely to be drafted than a 4-star. And this is in the 2017 draft. In the 2017 draft, a 4-star was 5.75 times more likely to be drafted than a 3-star.
Dang, yeah.
A 3-star, or excuse me, a 5-star, when you look, let's see, more likely than a 2-star, they're 3,600 times more likely to be drafted. So it's just not even close to say that it doesn't matter. Yes, it matters like more than we could ever really express on here, the likelihood. Now, in the micro sense, does that mean that these kids won't make it? No, because Gerard Davis and Quincy Wilson just got drafted in the 1st and 2nd rounds. Right. But when we say that it doesn't matter, it robs them of the significance of their accomplishment. Gerard Davis just became the only 3-star linebacker that I found. Now, I went back to 2005. He was the only 3-star linebacker from Florida to be drafted in the 1st round. And he and Quincy Wilson were the only 3-stars to be drafted in the 1st and 2nd round since 2005, other than Mike Pouncey, who went in the 1st. It's a big deal to do that. These kids overcame long odds. And when people, just kind of want to take the easy way out and kind of justify in their mind poor recruiting, they're saying it'll work itself out. And it's like, no, because you start taking those odds for those 3-stars and apply this math unless Jim McElwain or whatever else coach, and obviously McElwain's recruiting looks like it might be on the uptick, and this might not even be an issue, hopefully. But, whoever's listening, whether they're a Gator fan or not, you're asking your players and your coach to overcome odds that don't seem to be in their favor by factor of thousands.
And that's what we've tried to tell. We're not saying it can't happen, but the likelihood that it happens with the lower rated guys that, Jim McElwain has brought in his first two classes, he'd have to buck the trend, and they'd have to beat odds that are out there. It's proven, statistically, number wise, you see it on just with your eyes, how much better 5 stars and 4 stars are. You load your team up with those, your chances of winning are much higher. Can McElwain be a good enough coach to buck the trend? Maybe. But that's what we're looking for, and that's what we're saying when we say stars matter. So just to compare it to the NFL draft, 5 stars keep showing up on the field in college. And you know what? The NFL takes notice, and those same superstars are going to be drafted higher in higher rounds. You saw this. This is the first round. This is supposed to be the elite of the elite, and that trend just continues.
Yeah, and somebody mentioned on GatorBait, like the argument goes, they'll say, well, I'd rather have that blue-collar guy that shows up and works hard and he's going to be committed to his cause rather than that 5-star prima donna that doesn't work hard. And it's like, maybe you're disrespecting the 5-star that put in all that work to become a 5-star.
Yeah.
He's got the people around him to help him do that. And that's not to disrespect the guys like Quincy Wilson, who people probably should have seen coming, or Gerard Davis, that, sometimes kids do fall through the cracks. It happens. But the odds say that they're going to be few and far between. And keep this in mind, too. I worked this up based on the fact that in the entire draft, 5 stars only accounted for 9% of the entire draft. And these odds still played so heavily in their favor as far as the likelihood of an actual 5-star being drafted. But if we isolated this to the first round, would you triple their presence to 31.25% of the first round? It'd be much worse.
Yeah.
This is current numbers 2017 draft, and it tells us it's exponentially more likely for a 5-star to be drafted than a 2 or 3-star. It's just off the charts, and it's triple the likelihood of even over a 4-star, and the skyrockets even up. I think it's 200 times more likely than a 3-star. It's just crazy. And that's just the whole draft. We're about to get into what it's meant for the Gators over the past 10 years.
Right. Okay. And, before we move on, we mentioned Jerry Davis, 3-star recruit out of Kingsland, Camden County, Georgia. He was drafted before a lot of the big names out there, and specifically talking about Gators, Tabor, Caleb Brantley. But we know there was some issues with Brantley there. But he definitely would have been drafted ahead of Brantley anyway, no matter the legal issue or not. He would have been drafted above Caleb Brantley. So, 2 other defenders that's on there. Marcus May, I think was, same class, but he was a 4-star. Davis drafted higher than him as well. Is there anything more you want to add about Jared Davis being drafted above those guys? He bucked the trend for Florida. He was the 3-star that got, picked ahead of the 4 and 5-star guys. But, we already, we've mentioned that Jared Davis was one of the 5 3-stars that was drafted ahead of the superstars.
Yeah, I just don't think you can say enough about the guy. And again, that's to me, like saying these stars matter. It's a celebration of what these guys do. It's not to throw shade. And, if you're some guy like Joey Ivy that came in and maybe you are a lunch pail guy, and, I think Ivy should have been drafted higher than he was, and I know that we've got recruits that follow us on there. Hey, man, this is a tough world. I'm not here to blow smoke. And I know some of these guys out here that talk about Gator football they're saying, hey, don't say things that might insult the recruits. Hey, be insulted. I want you guys, if you're going to Florida or Florida State or Miami, if some service has rated you a 3-star, let your actions speak. You go out there and work. I've got a couple recruits I see on there just hustling that aren't. I saw there's one kid on there that just got his first offer from a small school, and he messaged me and he's so excited about it. And he's saying, hey, Florida's next. And you know what? Prove it.
Yeah.
Go prove it, man. I am all for it. And I want to celebrate you like Gerard Davis one day.
There you go. That's what I'm saying. Granted, you and I, we are the big 5-star, 4-star honk, but I will still right here sit down and admit There's still not a better story than a 3-star, 2-star guy who wasn't highly recruited and comes out and makes it. I mean, Jared Davis is probably one of my favorite Gators of all time, and partly because of this story and because of that reason. Cloris, and he's a local kid, right down the road, right up the road in Georgia. So, I got to follow him a good bit in high school as well. But, I do love those stories. Don't get me wrong. But also, we know what it takes to win. You have to supplement those guys with 4- and 5-star guys. And that's, and the link to the NFL shows it as well.
Yeah, I mean, man, if we start just making this all a matter of, it doesn't matter, it takes the special nature out of guys like Rex Grossman that bring his VCR tape or whatever it was down to Spurrier or Latsko or Doring or these guys. This is what makes it great.
And think about a lot of Florida, and think about a lot of Florida players we love because of it. Shane Matthews, you mentioned Chris Doring, Rex Grossman. I mean, those guys, are great Gators of all time because they bucked the trend.
Absolutely, man. So yeah, I'm all for it. But as far as I'm concerned, now obviously, if we want to be really scientific, we're going to have to add other drafts to this and watch for fluctuations and variance and all that. So, and I'm going to do that. But for the time being, I'd say this is a pretty definitive answer to whether stars correlate to the draft. In 2017, they sure as hell did.
Yeah. All right. So now, Bill, this is where we really get into the meat of the discussion for most of our listeners out there, and we can dial it down to just for the Gators and recent history of the NFL draft. You found some trends that further show why stars matter a lot for Florida players that get drafted. Pretty much, the chances are higher. The higher the ranking is, it's still pretty much what it boils down to, right?
Look, before I go any further. If you don't like me for what I'm saying, it's nothing personal, but I might post a hurt feelings report on Twitter for you to download and fill out, because this is about to get ugly when I start talking about this Gator stuff. It's not going to help your cause, but please don't be mad at me. All right, here we go. All right, first keep in mind that let me just give you a little methodology.
Oh, hold on. Here's the intro. 5-star nerd.
That's right. Here we go, man. All right, so here's what I did. I went back to 2005. And the reason I chose that was not arbitrary. I wanted to go back a year before because I could have included Cedric Faison, and I was kind of really getting into this, and Mike DeGore, but DeGore didn't have a profile because before 2002, you don't really have a good record of the star reports. You'll keep hearing me say that. And so I wanted to be consistent. The reason I chose 2005 is I was hoping there might be some drafted Gators that left early that were in the class of 2002 after 3 years. So with that said, back to 2005, Florida has signed 370. I'm sorry, since 2002's class, including pros that were drafted since 2005. In that group, you've got 372 signees for Florida in the recruiting classes. And of those, you've got 35 5-stars, against at 9%, very consistent with what we saw in the draft numbers. 162 of 4-stars that were 44% of all signees. And the largest group was 3 stars and under. I included the 2 stars in that group to make it a little simpler. There's 175 guys since 2002, 47% of Florida signees. So it's not like they've signed like 80% 4 and 5 stars. You got a few stragglers.
Yeah.
About half the guys were low-rated recruits. Now, of those, 70 Gators have been drafted in the NFL draft since 2005. Of the draftees, 21 of those were 5-stars. So 21 of their 35 5-stars have been drafted.
21 of 35 5-stars.
That's right.
Wow.
That's 60% of the 5-stars have been drafted. So a little lower than what we saw in the NFL draft as a whole, but this is Gator history, and so you got some things that change over time that affect that. Okay. So back to it. 21 5-stars have been drafted, 31 4-stars, 16 3-stars, and 2 2-stars. And among those 2-stars, I'm trying to help you out here, people. I believe I left Caleb Sturgis, the kicker, in there, and I left Ryan Smith. And that's significant because Ryan Smith was a transfer. I actually erred on the side of caution to try to pad this up for the Star Truthers.
Yeah.
Don't be mad at me for calling you that. And I left transfers in there. And the important reason
he only had one season.
Right. But you got to remember, when we leave the Ronaldo Hills, the Jeremy Mitzi's in there, those guys that didn't originally sign with Florida, Florida had extra years to evaluate them after high school. And so they may have been a low-rated recruit, but Florida had the advantage of identifying that outlier additional talent from the 3 stars, which does occur, and selecting to bring them in the fold. So it kind of skews it towards, showing 3 stars to be better than they were because they handpicked them after seeing them on a college field. Ryan Smith came from Utah as a transfer. He was actually in the class of 2003, but came over in his final year under the grad transfer rule to play for Urban Meyer in 2006. Make sense?
And Urban Meyer knew him, like you said, very well because he came from Utah.
And let's be honest, Urban Meyer he signed some good 3 stars too. So anyway, so the numbers
and not so good 3 stars.
The numbers are skewed to benefit that side of the argument. I tried to play against myself to make it tougher. Even so, 60% of the 5 stars ended up being drafted. 19% of the 4 stars ended up being drafted, and only 10% of the 2 and 3 stars ended up being drafted. So 5 stars were over 3 times more likely to be drafted from University of Florida than a 4 star at the University of Florida. 4 stars were almost twice as likely to be drafted from the University of Florida than a 3 star was. 5 stars were almost 6 times more likely to be drafted from UF than the 2s and 3s combined. So even those that were Florida quality guys that received all the benefits of the Florida Strength and Conditioning Program, the Florida coaching staff, it was apples to apples, taking all the disadvantages away of playing for wherever, Montana State or whatever. Those low-rated kids came in, and the 5 stars were 6 times more likely to be drafted from this school than they were.
I mean, it's also, it's also, just before you go even further, it also shows this is why Alabama, Florida, LSU have a lot more draft picks than UConn and Louisiana Monroe and, wherever, Utah, BYU, just all the schools, these bigger schools recruit better. That's also why they have more talent in the NFL.
All right, it's time to do the finishing move here. All right,
the atomic elbow.
Here comes the stunner. Not only were the higher rated kids drafted at a higher frequency, like more often, they were also drafted higher in the draft. The average round I'm going to read you the average rounds by star band. For 5 stars, they went from the University of Florida since 2005 in the draft. They've been drafted on average at 2.76 is the round. So latter half of the second round. 4 stars, 3.58, mid third round. 3 stars, 4.69, late fourth round. And 2 stars, middle of the fifth, 5.5. The average picks in those same order, 5, 4, 3, and 2 stars, 80.5 average pick in the draft for 5s, 105.4 for the 4 stars, the 3 stars, 145.6, and the 2 stars at 186. So you're losing a whole round almost on average by your star band, and about it's a lesser drop off from the 5s and the 4s, but then about 45 to 50 picks in the draft for each star band you are. So you're not only going less often, you're going lower in the draft.
Yeah, and you could also say the reason for the gap between 5 and 4 stars not being so big is, granted, there's really not as many 5 stars as there is 4 stars. And the services lately have actually been a little more picky about 5 stars in the last, I think, couple seasons now. You're starting to see, I think, less 5 stars and a little bit more 4 stars.
Yeah, and it's already such a minuscule segment of the population. I mean, if you made a pie chart, or imagine all the recruits in the country as a pizza, you're not getting half an anchovy for the 5 stars. I mean, it's just a tiny little fraction.
That's the way it should be. They're supposed to be the elite of the elite, and that's pretty much the route it's going and the route it's showing. So, Bill, with these numbers that you saw, were you actually surprised by what you saw? Or, because I didn't get to look up a lot of these. Like, as I mentioned, I was out, pretty busy all weekend. I didn't go do a lot of research, and you've done a lot here. And yes, we are the 4 and 5 star honks here, but was there still, did these numbers still surprise you at all?
The one that surprised me was how they were slotted in the draft, that they actually went lower. I mean, I guess I would expect that to be existent, but it's so uniform. I mean, just to see almost like 0.75 to 1 full round per star band, to see, once you get below the 4 stars, to see those 40 slots per band. I mean, it's so standardized almost. I mean, it almost looks like you just made it up, but I didn't. I mean, the math is here and I can show my work, and I mean, it is what it is. And on top of this, there's some other things to consider here. I mean, on top of these results, things that actually kind of distorted it maybe more away from what I'm contending for would be those non-football busts. I mean, you got to think about the 5 stars that Florida signed in that period who legitimately probably should have been drafted, but you got guys like Josh Shaw that came from the West Coast to play cornerback. He was a 5-star. He transferred back to USC and he was drafted in the 4th round, and he's still in the NFL. If that kid had stayed, well, there's another one. Or Will Hill. I don't know what in the heck happened with Will Hill, but the guy's still in the NFL.
Yeah.
The safety came in here. He had all the tools. He was 5-star. He just never really got it going here. It was kind of weird.
Yeah.
How about Jeff Driscoll had to deal with Muschamp?
Yeah. Well, just also think about this draft in particular, how it could have even benefited our argument even more. Alex Anzalone stays healthy. He probably goes higher. Caleb Brantley doesn't get in legal trouble. He's probably more than likely in all mocks was a 2nd-round pick. So
yeah, there's some inherent risk with those 5 stars too. The Gary Browns and Torrey Davises of the world that just can't get it together academically or whatever. And
Jeff Driscoll.
I mean, things happen. So I'm a little hesitant to go to be an apologist for those guys, but this could have been worse. It could have been worse, and it's already pretty damning to the argument. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, it's indefensible. From an NFL draft standpoint, there's no good argument other than to say, I just don't care. And tell Joey I said that.
I think Joey will probably back us up on this. We'll have to see if he gets a chance to listen tomorrow. But before we record, so Bill, anything else about this draft you wanted to hit before we dive into our quick next topic before we wrap it up?
No, I know you guys are going to have a lively discussion about certain ex-coaches and Caleb Brantley falling, and I'm going to leave that to you. But I can't stress it enough. I'm just really super happy to see what Davis and Wilson accomplished, and I think there's going to be some good pros out of this draft.
Yeah, I think so too. Especially Anzalone can stay healthy. I know I mentioned him. I'm a huge fan of his. Hopefully, he can keep it together in the NFL more than he did at Florida and show what he's all about there.
Yeah, absolutely, man. He's one of my favorites, but he's one of those guys that just you agonize because you never really get to see him at full strength. And Florida's had a lot of those guys of late, and I think a lot of those hurt Muschamp.
Yeah, I mean,
both on the offensive line and like Matt Rowland and some of those guys.
I mean, I named Anzalone when he got drafted. He was the ultimate what if player for Florida. We got to see bits and pieces in this last season. We got to see more than we had seen in the past, and we saw it. But then came that Arkansas game, and it was more of the same that we saw, and couldn't finish the season. So,
yeah, I growing up in the '90s and playing ball in Florida, there was Florida Gators signing, and I think it was Willie Green was a running back out of Kissimmee, Osceola. That I got to see him play in person, and he was something special at running back. But he came in with a lot of mileage on his knees, and it just never materialized. So, I'm glad to see that Anzalone, with at least he made it to the draft, and he's going to get some money out of this, and hopefully it'll pay off. Yeah.
So next, Bill, a topic that hits close to home for us. I live in Jacksonville now. I was born in Jacksonville. You were raised in Jacksonville as well. Florida-Georgia game being extended in Jacksonville through 2021. Of course, as I always talk about, a home and home with the Bulldogs, and a lot more from the Georgia side lately because Florida has had a lot of success since 1990 when Steve Spurrier came and started to dominate Georgia. But I threw a poll up. Do you like the game being held in Jacksonville, or would you like to see Florida and Georgia move to home and home? So right before this podcast, out of 265 votes, 82% have voted to keep. They wanted to keep the game in Jacksonville. We have it for 5 more seasons till 2021. Bill, of course, I think you'll agree this is probably a good move. This is tradition. This is what Jacksonville, one of the reasons Jacksonville is known for. It's even though the schools don't want to call it that, it's the world's largest outdoor cocktail party. And if you've ever been, that's exactly what it is. There is no fabricating that story whatsoever. So the game should stay in Jacksonville. I'm glad we get at least 5 more years. But it's a sight to see, and the game should stay there forever.
Yeah, if you've ever been, you may not remember it. No, man. Listen, I grew up on the west side of Jacksonville on the wrong side, and there was nothing like it, man. I actually had several Bulldogs on my street growing up as a kid, and I can still remember them like popping their garage open and having the whole block down and talking smack. And a lot of my Georgia friends, and I live in the Atlanta area now, and every one of them is like, oh yeah, I'll get that extra home game every year. And I'm like, so you want it to move home and home? They're like, hell no. So I think both sides, I know the Georgia fans like to complain about it, but man, that's an institution. And I mean, how many games do you really get like that, especially in the South?
Yes.
There's just not many things like that.
I mean, and granted, I mean, we didn't hear this moaning and groaning when Georgia was winning, when Georgia was dominating. There was never talk of moving home and home. It was, oh yeah, we love the game in Jacksonville. So it's like as I mentioned, it all kind of changed when Spurrier set the streak, and I think he only lost once in '97 to Georgia. Even Zook had some good success against some really, really good Georgia teams. Muschamp got a win in his last season. McElwain is yet to lose to him. And Florida has dominated since 1990 in this rivalry. But minus playing, they played 2 years, of course, home and home. When Alltel was being built, when the Jaguars got the team here in Jacksonville. But yeah, it's granted, it was good seeing Florida, as Steve Spurrier was saying, hang half 100 between the hedges. But if anything, if it has to be moved for whatever reason, still keep the game in Jacksonville. If it has to be, maybe once a decade you do a home and home. So I guess both teams can experience it. But if I had a vote and the way I want it to go, I want the game to stay in Jacksonville. It was from 99 to 2007. I went every year inside the stadium. I've been many years lately where we just stay or tailgate outside the stadium, whatever it is. There is nothing like Florida, Georgia in Jacksonville.
Yeah, man. Yeah. I could tell you some stories just about the great times I've had down there. And like you said, I am intrigued by the idea of maybe once a decade, or whatever, every 5 years you host one at a home and home, I guess. But, there's just nothing like the RV City and the Jacksonville Landing. And honestly, and I'm not the type to be hostile or whatever, but I've just had some great times talking to Georgia fans in Jacksonville. And I just love it, man. I love the culture of it. It's maybe one of my absolute favorite things about Gator football.
Oh, it definitely is. And I was raised in, you said you live in Atlanta now. I was raised in South Georgia after being born in Jacksonville. All my best friends are Georgia fans. The game means a lot to them, too, in Jacksonville. They don't want it to leave. It's only an hour and a half from Southeast Georgia where I grew up. It's an easy ride for a lot of Georgia fans, too, that can't make it up the 4-hour drive to Athens. This is the one game they get to, it's for Southern Georgia fans. This is the game they get to go to every year. You go to that game, and a lot of people don't even have tickets. It's a big party. It's an event. So, for my vote, of course, nobody's going to ever ask my opinion about it. But yeah, Florida, Georgia stays in Jacksonville.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, man. Couldn't agree more.
All right, Bill, I think we're going to sign off here for this episode of Gators Breakdown, where we statistically looked up some draft analysis. So, Bill, before we do sign off, do you want to little shout outs or anything, or
I did want to do that real quick. I posted on the board about our show tonight and had some good response from a couple of guys on 24/7. That's kind of our favorite place to talk about Gator football. If you guys want to check them out, that's gatorbait.net, the 24/7 sports network. Alpha Gator 1906, Gator Jeff 22, SU Gator 51. I really appreciate all you guys, and
for sure.
Also on Twitter, I had a few guys reach out recently. Khalifa Tafari, Sean AL 484. He's a constant presence on our discussions, and we couldn't appreciate you guys more. And one last one, Mark Keir's design for my new Twitter banner edit, man. It looks pretty cool.
I have to get on that this week too.
Yeah, we got something cooking on that. So all of our listeners and the Twitter followers and the people we commune with on Gator Bait, guys, thank you so much, and we got some big things planned.
Yeah, for sure. The show's growing every week, it seems. So good. Thank you, guys. We got some stuff coming up, too, as well that might be a little cool. We'll get some things going out there. But, yeah, for sure, all you guys that follow us on GatorBait and on Twitter, social media out there, Facebook as well, just thanks for all the interaction and all that good stuff there. So, Bill, anything else before we get off here?
No, thanks for tuning in to kind of our abbreviated little segmented show here. I know you guys are going to have fun with this Brantley thing tomorrow night. I'm going to miss being on there with y'all, but we'll pick it up next week.
For sure, for sure. So, yeah, as we mentioned, Joey and I will have another show. This is Sunday night. We're doing a recording of this show. So, Joey and I will have a show recording on our normal Monday night. So, for Bill, this is Dave. This has been episode 61 of Gators Breakdown, where we still believe stars matter, and in particular on this one of the NFL draft. So, again, for Bill, I'm Dave. Thanks for listening to Gators Breakdown.